Thank you very much for joining us on PM Express tonight. Tonight, my guest is Kwaku Kwarteng. He's a member of parliament for Obuasi West. And he's put out an article that has become very topical, explosive even. He's been candid and honest, both as a politician and as a Ghanaian. And I'm pretty sure if we ask him, he'll possibly tell you that this is more being Ghanaian than being a politician. And he's my guest tonight on PM Express for a very frank conversation about this article that you may or may not have seen. Kwaku Kwarteng, thank you very much.
Thank you, and for coming to have this interview with me and to give me the opportunity to put some of the views that I have shared across. Welcome to my humble office.
And I said, you possibly authored this maybe as a politician, maybe as a Ghanaian, but I argue that you did this purely as a Ghanaian.
I think both because there are elements in there that is seeking to get all of us as Ghanaians to pay attention to what I consider to be looming danger. But as a politician, because I consider that going into an election, if my party would avert their mind to what is of concern to the electorate and craft a message that addresses what the electorate feel about us politicians, we would be in a better stead to get their votes.
And to break the eight.
And to break the eight. So in that sense, I wrote it as a politician, but I think there's an underlining passion that this country is all we have. We need to leave it in a better shape for our children. And if we see danger coming, we have a responsibility to draw attention to it.
And for those of you who haven't seen that article, I want to read it. It's actually a short read, and so allow me to do that. Kwaku Kwarteng writes, Ghana's fourth republic has given 8 years to ruling parties, not more. Beyond the loyalists of the various political parties, voters believe that when one political party governs for some time, they must leave for another political party to come. The voter belief is coming from something we hear all the time. All politicians are the same. Let one go and let another come. We, NPP, are looking to break the eight. It is an expectation coming at the time when hostile external factors have imposed considerable hardship on the average Ghanaian voter. But it is not just external factors that threaten our chances of electoral victory. The economic problems Ghana is facing today, at both the national level and in households, are also the cumulative effects of many decades spanning different governments of the bad politics and economic mismanagement that have characterized the governance of our country. Since independence, we have survived by constantly overspending our means and borrowing to finance the overspending. And many of these expenditures are just bad prioritization. We always offer higher interest to lenders, borrow more, use a part to repay previous debts, and the rest to pay for the current year's overspending. So, he says, we have been running our country's economy like a Ponzi scheme. The economy is struggling today because lenders are now refusing to lend to us. It is just like a Ponzi scheme going into crisis once people stop depositing their monies into them. Many Ghanaians, myself included, worry that if we continue along the path we have been walking, our democracy will collapse. And it will, and with it all our political parties. To save our country from this looming danger, the political class must acknowledge this reality and change behavior. And we don't have time. Since independence, the political norm has been that a political party going into an election must sing praises of its past achievements and make high-sounding promises for the future. At the same time, a political party must paint its opponents in the worst possible light. We have mastered this art, and in the process, we are forgetting that politics should be about the future of our children and our motherland. We have reduced election campaigns to bitter struggles between competitors seeking power for the wrong reasons. He continues, that it is this primitive political culture that has led to the belief that all politicians are the same and produce the 8-year cycle we are seeking to break. To break the 8, therefore, we must first break that norm by doing the following. 1, acknowledge the past and present failures of the political class to provide the kind of quality leadership required to avert the mess in which we find our country today. Adopt deep and far-reaching reforms to address the decades of bad politics and economic mismanagement. We must convince voters that we shall be ruthless in our determination to fix this country, that we shall stay the course no matter the challenges, and that there shall be no sacred cows. We must lead by example. As a precondition for any reforms, we must demonstrate sacrifices we shall make as politicians to convince our people that we are in this together. We must address concerns about how much of our national resources we spend on ourselves as politicians and take steps to overhaul the corrupt public procurement regime we inherited from previous governments and have continued to live with. Once we lead by example, we can say with integrity to our people that we are sinking in a common boat and call all Ghanaians to duty. As a political party, if we sincerely believe and can demonstrate our faithfulness to these commitments, breaking the 8 will follow naturally, he concludes. And Mr. Kwarteng, you were a former Deputy Finance Minister between 2017 to 2001 after the elections and the swearing in. You recently was also the chair of the Finance Committee in Parliament. I'm curious, what inspired this article?
Well, to start, I think these are perspectives I have been sharing and others have been sharing in many internal conversations of the party. I'm not alone in these perspectives. But the reason I wrote this is that we are now discussing how we win the 2024 election. And I'm one of those who want us to win that election badly. And I've been thinking, what is it that Ghanaians want to see before they would have the comfort that these are the people we want to renew the mandate for? When I look around, I see a lot of discontent in our people in respect of how we politicians are working for them. And here it is not just the administration, nor is it just the NPP. There is a general sense that the politicians are out for ourselves and that we are not governing to improve the lives of the citizenry. And I have heard many people warn, especially those of you from the media, that if we walk along that path, we are going to have some explosion at some point.
A view you obviously share, which you've articulated.
Now, if this is what is out there, and you want those same people to give you the mandate, then you address it for them. A political party's business is to see what the citizens are looking for, and to the extent that it makes sense to deliver, so they would in turn sign that social contract with us as we're giving you the power. So all I'm calling my party to do is to listen to the concerns out there and to see if these messages would not be what we should take into the next election. So that is what has prompted this. But I think I'm also motivated by the fact that I'm speaking in humility. I think I understand the economy and I understand where we're going. And it is, again, not the fault of this particular administration.
Where are we going?
We're heading for trouble. When I say we are heading for trouble because historically we have cultivated the culture of borrowing to survive. It doesn't happen in the lives of individuals. It doesn't happen in the lives of households. It doesn't happen in the lives of countries. That a particular country says, we would always spend money that we do not have, overspend our means. But somehow we can continue like that and be a developed country. It's never going to happen. And if we want to avert the danger that some of us are seeing, when I say danger, it's your country running into a situation where you may not even have sufficient money to buy the things you need to buy from outside and all those things. It may not be this administration, but the fact remains that the path that sinks independence we're walking, that path is leading to that danger. And we're beginning to see symptoms of it. Look, if you see the cedi struggling against other currencies and you see some of the things that are happening in our economy, we having to do restructuring, we having to do that. They are wake-up calls to us that all the wrong things we have been doing in the past are now coming to a head. And if you don't change course, it is going to be very painful to correct the problem once it becomes uncontrollable. So that is, all these have gone to urge some of us to promote this kind of conversation within our party. Actually, this piece, I wrote it internally. I wrote it for our internal discussions. We did discuss it in a few NPP platforms. That was 4 days ago. So it was just yesterday that I realized that somehow it's gotten outside NPP circles. And I thought that if I didn't take proactive steps to participate in the conversation and the discussion of this article, people might misread it. And the point I want Ghanaians to hear, and especially my party people, is this is not a criticism of this administration. If you read the article, I am saying that as a country we've been walking a certain path, that path is leading us nowhere.
A path, though, that this government had also walked in the last
I think a
years.
path that I wished that in the last 7 years we would have departed from.
But you have not.
Unfortunately, we have not. And what I am saying is better late than never.
I'm curious about, again, understanding the motivations. You say this was an internal conversation.
Yes, it was.
So this is within the NPP?
Yes.
In what forum? This WhatsApp chat
WhatsApp
or in
platforms. Meetings? There are other internal engagements we've had that I would rather keep quiet for now. But this particular one was for NPP platforms, and I was hoping that it would shape our own communication with the public, so that if it had not come out and generated this kind of debate, you probably would have heard other NPP people articulating it, and it would not even have been known that I probably started this. That was the original idea. But once it got out, I think...
So when you say it got out, did somebody take that?
Oh, sure.
And share it?
I suspect so.
Okay.
Also, in fact, the first time I saw it out, I was a bit unnerved and said, but then it was all over the place. Then I realized the comments that were being made. And you see, you read the whole article, so it's easy to understand what I was saying. If you just picked one line and said, we are running the country like a Ponzi scheme, and then understandably, party faithfuls would see it and say, how can you say this about our government? We must reform the corrupt public procurement regime. If you read it, I said that we inherited from previous governments. But if you see an article that just says we should correct, or a leaflet that just says we should correct the corrupt public procurement regime, it's almost to say you are attacking your government. And that is why I find it necessary to step in to make the case that it is our country's future that is at stake. I'm not referring necessarily to this administration, and that I think that as a country we should change course. And last point, this thing is not just for NPP people, even though originally that is where the message in there is good for non-NPP people as well. That the political class is not made up of just NPP people. In fact, I make this point that if you look at Parliament right now, Parliament is led by the minority. parliament, the Parliamentary Service Board, parliament, is actually led by the minority, NBC. Yes. And yet, some of the things I'm complaining about in the executive, I found here as well. And you remember in some of the things I have said on the floor in respect of how we should cut expenditure, I have asked Parliament that there are things we could stop doing. I think we can reduce the travels, for instance. We can cut costs, live within our means, let our currency be stable, and then private sector people can generate wealth and give this country the prosperity we need. So I'm not just talking about the NPP, I'm speaking to the political class, but I am hoping that the NPP would lead that conversation, because I know the NPP more than I do other political parties. I think we have the capacity to digest this, to own it, and to put out in a sincere way.
When you first shared it in the group, how was it received by your other colleagues?
Fairly good, so long as it was internal conversation. People are quite happy. Plus, you published the whole thing, and generally it was good. And
within the MPP
within most MPP circles. But I have noticed that there are some who may not have read it, there are other party people who may not have been on any of those platforms where it was shared, and all they are seeing is a headline that says, we are running the country like a Ponzi scheme. And actually, people can't believe it. And some are sending me text message. Did you really say that?
I'll come to that so you can expand on that Ponzi scheme concept, because it's a powerful headline. But we'll place it in the proper context. I want to go back to the fundamentals, because you lay a foundation for this. You're the first MPP politician I have heard who places the current economic crisis within its comprehensive context. Yes, you point to the global circumstances, which is a fact, but you don't stop there. Most of your colleagues will stop there and say Ukraine, will say the pandemic, and stop there. But you go on, because we've heard that already, so that's not new, but you go on to tell us that the economic problems Ghana is facing today at both the national level and the households are also the cumulative effects of many decades spanning different governments of the bad politics and economic management that have characterized the governance of our country. So, to put it in context, you say you can go as way back as just after independence and track it all the way now. Two things: bad politics, economic mismanagement. Give me an example of what you mean by bad politics.
Well, let me just even pick it from what you said. Why is it that our country may be facing economic challenges because there's a global context, but also because of the way we have done things? And we know that traditionally we have been borrowing to survive, and that to deal with the problem would mean we need to go and tackle those fundamentals. Because you see, when COVID came, everybody got affected. But post-COVID is showing us that those countries that had stronger immune system were affected less by the pandemic. Those countries with weak immune systems were more harshly affected. So why do we not want to deal with those fundamentals? So if you hear opposition politicians saying it is all about mismanagement of just this regime, that's how they put it, when we know that this culture predates the current regime. And then you have people on the government side, and indeed the opposition people even disagree that there's any such thing as external factors, when we all know that we have indeed been impacted adversely by external factors. And then you flip it on the government side, we want to say that it's all external factors, and that but for external factors the country was doing fine, when again the records would show that indeed we had been managing this economy with a culture that is unsustainable. Our inability on both sides of the political divide to face up to what the reality is and devise strategies to deal with the problems is part of the bad politics I'm talking about. And even as this statement has come out, it is not, you would see people taking just portions because you're in the opposition, and letting it look like you are just referring to this administration in order to score political points. I remember telling a friend of mine who is not in NPP, who showed me one of the leaflets, and I said, so upon all the things I said about the future of our country, the fact that there's a looming danger because of the way we have been managing the economy, you were not touched. All that you find in what I wrote is that small piece that would win you political advantage, let's say for one election. So there's a certain disconnect of people from what we ought to be doing to improve the future of our children and to improve the future of our motherland. And I see that as bad politics. We put a lot of things before the collective good, and that I consider to be bad politics. And it is because of that we have then had to make decisions, sometimes to serve partisan interests on both sides. It predates this administration, even though we also have to accept our fair share of the blame. We make decisions that we know may not help the country as a whole, but we think the narrow advantage it brings us is what we are interested in for now, and then our country pays the price subsequently. That is what I call the bad politics.
But you understand why that focus will be on, well, this government in the last 7 years, because you've been part of it. As a deputy finance minister, you've been the chair of the finance committee in parliament, and you say that second is economic mismanagement. You accept that that is also a verdict on the last 7.5 years?
Well, I preceded it by saying spanning decades across different governments. Now, what I mean is, this behavior is a cultural thing. So you see it in, look, if we go to the Mama administration, there were a number of political decisions with economic consequences that we all discussed and criticized. We are hearing similar criticisms against this government. So the reason I am reluctant to turn this into a criticism of one regime is that then it gives the impression that merely changing that regime solves the problem. If really all the problems we are discussing facing Ghana today is the result of something this administration has done wrong, then Ghana does not really have a problem. All you have to do is to vote against the government, and there our heaven comes. But you and I know that that is not enough. And what I am saying, that there should be more to our efforts than assessing governments and voting people in. Look, politicians can go in and out, in and out, in and out, and yet the people would continue to get a bad deal. So what I am calling for, and the reason I say we should span it across the whole time, that it is a cultural thing. And look, I have seen enough to tell me that sometimes it is not even so much which political party is in power. It is what individuals have power to do and what they want to do. They may be in which party, they may be in which party. If they have weak sense of patriotism, it doesn't matter the political party in which they find themselves. They can do very bad things. So that the discussion should be the thing the political class has been doing wrong the whole time, and how we stop that culture.
How do you stop it? Because elections offers you an opportunity. In fact, you place it within the context of an election.
Yes.
Right? But I hear you say, both the NDC and the NPP, bad politics, economic management, both of you unfit for purpose.
Well, I do not think you can have aliens coming to govern us.
Not a third force, maybe?
I'm coming. That third force, if they come, and the systems and the cultures and the pressures of government that we see today is what they're going to operate within, trust me, the outcomes will not be any different, even if a third force was really possible. What I think should happen is for a political party like the NPP that have people that think like I am doing, to say, this is our own country, it is our motherland, and this is where we draw the line. And we will begin to do the reforms that ultimately would place us on the path to prosperity. I am more willing to invest my energies in that project than to imagine that there can be an external party to do this. After all, we saw in 1979, 1981, people come and say they are the saviors. And it turned out that today, we will look back and say, well, these guys really the saviors. I think the answer does not lie in just changing human beings. The answer lies in those human beings who are here right now, recognizing that the path we have been walking has not been a good one, and committing to change. And I think when you set the systems in motion, if NPP, we can commit and be clear in the reforms we want to do, and Ghanaians we do it credibly, I think Ghanaians will believe us. They would give us the breaking the 8 we want.
Yes.
I'm coming. Let me land on this. And once they give that to us, and we will be true to the commitments we made before the election and effect those changes, it is not easy for another party to come to roll things back. So whatever it is, we have a responsibility to initiate the new Ghana that we are all envisaging. And that is where I think the NPP has the capacity to do it, has the men to do it.
But they haven't done it per your own verdict in the last 7.5 years.
Yeah, but if you are...
Then if they haven't done it in 7.5 years, they can't do it in 4 months on election.
But you can't know. Of course, I know. Look, there are some of the changes that I, for instance, would call for that cannot be done in 4 months. You know, when I wrote that we should embark on deep and far-reaching reforms, I did not really indicate what some of those reforms would be. And I want to leave that discussion to the collective effort. But I am one of those who believe that do we need 275 members of parliament? Do we, the expenditures, and when I say we should lead by example, are there areas we can cut to demonstrate to our people that we are in this together, and therefore let's move? So it would require a lot of sometimes constitutional, sometimes legislative to effect some of the changes that I'm envisaging. But if you go out there and to say, look, we want to depart from the past and acknowledge sincerely that what we have been doing wrong cannot continue, and now begin to lay out the changes you would make. And where possible, I mean, look, there are many of these developed countries that give us money. If you are a minister or you are an ambassador here and you're traveling, you are not allowed to travel business class. You have to travel economy. We are a poor country, we want to go to those people. But even directors of ministries think that when they are traveling, they must travel business class at the expense of the state. I think those things, they are little things, but they are signals we can deploy to begin to show that indeed charity is beginning at home. So that part of the statement I wrote was summarized. So I said, let's do far-reaching reforms.
And I'll come to one of them after the other, because I think you go through that, the thing they need to do to break the. I'll come to that and measure it against what is currently happening in your government, because that is very specific.
So then to summarize my answer
to the party as it goes into the elections. But I want to go to the big issues, some of the big issues that you touch on, which is running the economy like a Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
I mean, let me this explain. Is a former deputy finance minister saying this. First of all, keeping them honest, you admit that is an indictment on yourself.
Yes, it is, to the extent that I've been a politician, I've been in the Ministry of Finance, I've been in Parliament. I think I accept part of the blame.
Okay. And what did you do about it then?
Or
when did you realize that this was actually happening?
I've always known that some of the things we've been doing are wrong. And if you listen to my debate on the floor, you go back to YouTube, you see that some of these things, I keep saying them. In fact, after this statement, if things don't change, and let's say in a year's time, I say these things, people are going to say, but when you saw it, what did you do about it? We can only continue pushing these conversations, hoping that we will change sufficient minds to get people to support the changes that we want to see. But I accept, and that is when I say the political class must accept that we have failed to provide the kind of quality leadership that the country needs, and that we should be able to draw the line and say we are changing behavior. It should not be too hard for us. And I end on this. Even in our individual lives, you could be leading a certain life, you could be having a certain lifestyle, and you like it. But at some point, you take stock of your circumstances and say, this thing is not helping. Going forward, I won't do it again. Why can we not do that as a country? If we go to the Ghanaians and say, look, we have been doing this, but we think things must change. Why would Ghanaians will be happy? Look, these statements that I issue, and I listen to people out there, and they love it. They just want their politicians to do this for them. Why can we not just do this? And even harmless statement like this, just calling us to be true to our own people, still people have room to find fault with it. That's what I call the bad politics. So I think NPP, we can do it, and I would continue to push for the conversation internally and hope that there will be sufficient numbers to affect the way NPP wants to present itself in the next election.
The next elections. And between 2017 and 2021, was this something that you knew was happening?
I've always known that the way we were borrowing to survive was wrong.
And Furiata was your boss. Did you make this point in?
You know, let me also make this point. I see where the conversation is going. And you know, the media people, you're also part of the politics. All right? Look, when I see the dangers ahead, the fact that if we fail to change course, the dangers and how we are endangering our whole democracy, we should begin to examine the strategies to get it out of this. You can go on and ask me about specifically Kenneth Furiata and Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. When you do that, people become defensive. A project to help deal with the challenges my country is facing is redirected into personal discussions about how did you feel about this. The result is that we take energy away from what we ought to do to give ourselves a good country and to end in these matters. So I'm telling you that, look, let's move away from you personally. This thing may well have been said by somebody in academia. The fact that it is coming from me, and I've been in the ministry, for the media and the way you guys have operated, I think it's a legitimate question. But if we are going to change course, the media too has to examine the way they've been interacting with state managers and not get us. In fact, since this discussion started, your interview has been very good. There are people who are just interested in finding NPP NDC in this. And I say that immediately you reduce this whole discussion into personal and partisan ones, then my job is to defend my party. So help me to steer away from...
the message is as important as the messenger, right? And people need to believe in the credibility of the messenger. You're raising some very important fundamental issues about our collective futures as a country. But you were in a position to make some changes and to influence change because you had power then. Beyond personalizing and saying what you did with your boss, what did you do with your government to get them to see the importance of this matter, to see why running the economy like a Ponzi scheme was damaging and may lead us down the path we are currently on? People want to hear you say that I tried, and now I am not in government, I am necessarily not a minister, and it's time to go public. That is how people hang on to your word and say they can fight with you because this man did it when he had power. That's why that question is fundamental. So I asked the question again, beyond Oforiatta, did you take steps when you were there as a deputy finance minister, knowing that under your watch, under his watch, under cabinet's watch, you're running the government, you're running the economy as a Ponzi scheme to draw the attention?
I have always drawn. You see, I think to start with, it is not fair on the people with whom I worked in government to bring out what I said and what who said and whether it was taken. I don't think it's necessary.
But did you?
I did. Look, and it is not just even before government. Look, I used to write a column called Taflache when I was a student. You see some of these themes there. It is something I've always believed in. When I was in the ministry, I would always bring my sensitivity to expenditure to bear on the discussions. All right. People may have had various reasons for agreeing or disagreeing with me. You say that sometimes the message is as important as the messenger. That is when we are not clear about the message. That is when you begin to look at the messenger and to see whether this message we should accept. When the message is as clear as daylight, you're giving people haircut. You are doing this. Your city is dropping. I'm saying that we are going into a ditch, and you don't want us to, not you. Instead of focusing on how we change course, you now want to focus on the messenger. By the time you would have finished analyzing the messenger, the country would have lost some time. My respectful suggestion to not just you, but the media, is that let us also try and do a different kind of media, because we have been used to politicians fighting and you standing in the middle and asking people to respond. And I think we should also now begin to even call out politicians who are so partisan and therefore spare me. What I have put out, it is from the bottom of my heart. I definitely want to see these changes made. I cannot go home and I see my kids and I hug them and I come to work and I come and make decisions or support decisions that would hurt their future. I can't live with that. And I need everybody, yourself included, to help us change the future for our children.
I'm going to take a break. When I return, it's 4 months to an election. We'll go through what he proposes his party must do to break the 8. But the fundamental question remains: too little, too late maybe, and can change happen within 4 months? He makes fundamental proposals about what the party must do to break the 8. We'll go through that. And he makes the point that his life has been a demonstration of the things that he's now penned and shared publicly. There are instances in his past that prove that. He issued a statement recently that says he actually had to decline a ministerial appointment. It's extremely rare for that to happen, but he did so. And the points that he's making, we'll ask him about that. And how does he plan to carry this crusade forward? How is he planning to recruit like minds in his party and beyond the party to get this agenda going to a point where it affects the future substantially for our collective children and children's children? Stay with us here on PM Express. And thanks for staying with us here on the PM Express. My guest is Kwaku Kwarteng. He is a former Deputy Finance Minister between 2017 and 2021. Until recently, he was the chair of the Finance Committee in Parliament, and he's written an article that has generated a fair bit of attention that we are speaking to him about. And I mentioned until recently he was the chair of the Finance Committee, and we've been told that he's now the chair of the Economic Committee. I wanted to clarify that pretty shortly, because as for media, we call you now and say, Kwaku Kwarteng, the chair of the Economic Committee. Are you the chair of the Economic Committee?
No, at the time the majority leader made that point on the floor, they had not sat down to really allocate the committees, and he just assumed that the majority side will be holding the chairmanship for the committee. When they sat down to do the negotiations, it turned out that the Economic Committee had to go to the NDC. That is to say, they were going to have the chairman and also to have the majority on that committee. Because of that, I couldn't be the chairman for the Economic Committee, but I'm on that committee. And it doesn't take much because we work together in Parliament. And
so you're a member of that committee?
I'm a member of that.
You don't chair any committee?
No. I don't chair any committee at the moment.
Let's quickly talk about the Ponzi scheme. We just touched on it in the context of what you did when you were the Deputy Finance Minister. But what really are you talking about? Okay, so what's a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is an arrangement where people take deposits from investors, if you like, people who want to put their money into some scheme, and then after a while they go and get the money plus interest. So we've seen the pyrams, and what those Ponzi schemes do is that they give you very good interest. So you bring your money to them, and then they are squandering some of the money. And then when it is it is time for the early investors to redeem their investments, they use those who brought it recently, because they are offering high interest and people are just bringing the money. They use that to pay off the old people. And then that is how it goes. So it would go until at some point when they have a difficulty because the inflows coming are not enough to continue the scam. That is when we get the Ponzi scheme going down. Because as soon as one person goes, they can't get their money. People panic, they rush to get their money, and the Ponzi scheme collapses. In Ghana, from independence, what we do is we always have over expenditures. That is to say, we have revenue, we have money or income, and then we also have expenditures. When we are planning expenditures, they are always more than our income. So the difference, we borrow. The following year, you still are spending more than your revenue. Therefore, you need money to finance the gap. And then you also need money to go and pay the debt you collected yesterday for yesterday's deficit. So continually, you keep borrowing more and more to pay your previous debt, but also to finance the current year's over expenditures. As far as I am concerned, and this is what we have been doing since independence, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a Ponzi scheme. It's only a Ponzi scheme that relies on future borrowings to pay off previous borrowings. A proper borrowing is when you take money and you invest it so that the returns from that would pay off the debt you incurred. Then you know that you are borrowing wisely. You say it's a Ponzi scheme. To put it in the layman's language, and many people understand this, you mean it's a scam? Well, it is not a scam because, well, in the case of a Ponzi scheme, it is a scam. You would say it's a scam. But you see, in the case of a country, the investors, they know your economy. They understand everything, and they are still giving you the money in hopes that you would pay them back. But now, it's caught up with us. I'm coming. You're unable to pay them. Exactly. So what happens in respect of the national Ponzi scheme, if you like, is that the investors come to a point when you're going to them to say, the money you gave us, we cannot give you everything. We can only give you a part. That is what signals that things are coming to a head. And so, as I indicated, no Ponzi scheme lasts forever. This culture of borrow to spend and a perpetual deficit year after year is unsustainable. It's very unsustainable. And that's why I think in some of these discussions too, there ought to be... But why do governments do that? Because it must be obvious. Governments do that because of bad politics and just fiscal misbehavior. It is this, that you just want to do things. People like to sign contracts, all right? We enjoy signing contracts and all that goes with it. We like to spend and people want stuff. You want the votes. So you just go spending without pausing to say that I may well spend today and get whatever I want in the short run. In the long run, what is its impact on my country, on the economy? If you don't avert your mind to that and you just want to do some quick fixes, that gives you some immediate results, which ultimately would hurt your country, I call that bad politics. And we've done a lot of it as a country in the past before this administration. And every Ponzi scheme eventually collapses. Will collapse. Ghana, ours is coming to a head. Look, well, when you see... It has already collapsed, has it not? Not for the first time in forever, We've done domestic debt exchange. It's never happened before. That is the mother of all collapse.
Look, things could get worse.
It could.
I'm telling you that if we continue to spend money we do not have.
Are we still doing that, by the way? Are we still spending monies we don't have, even as we try and manage this crisis?
Well, I think our expenditures are still more than our revenues, even under the media review that was presented. But I concede that, you need to come out gradually. And I'm happy. I looked at the data before we had this meeting, and I realized that the deficit figure projected for 2024 is one of the lowest in the last 10 years. And of course, in the circumstances, you're not really in a position to spend. That is a good thing. I hope that we would gradually go there. But I also look around and I see a lot of things within the political class that suggests to me that we are not spending because people are not giving us the money. And that if we're going to be giving the money, we probably would spend. That is why I think this conversation is important.
That you mean if we get the money, we will spend.
If people were willing to lend us money, I suspect that the deficit figure would have been bigger than it is. And I don't know, maybe. But you see, that is where this conversation should catch on. If we were now beginning to reduce our deficit, not so much because we do not have money, but because we realize that there are people even willing to give us money, but we say, hold on, we want to spend within our means, or we want to reduce the gap gradually to a balanced budget. Then I am hopeful. At the moment...
You're not hopeful? At the moment, you're not hopeful?
At the moment, we need this to solidify that hope.
We
need this discussion. Yes, we need
and a movement around this to force the politicians to do the things you're prescribing they do.
I don't believe that good economy would happen by chance.
How would it happen?
It would happen after a deliberate decision has been made to change the behavior of overspending our means, prioritizing our expenditures. Unless there is a clear commitment to do those things, then when I begin to see the outcomes, I know that this is a product of a changed Ghana.
Let me ask you, your political friends, your politician friends, and your colleagues. You've been a politician a long time.
Yeah.
You think they're willing to do this by themselves, or somebody external needs to compel them?
I think there's greater goodwill towards this discussion than it's obvious. There are people, look, the politicians, even within the NPP, also care about Ghana. And many of them, since I've been having this discussion didn't start 4 days ago when this came out. We've been having this discussion internally. And there are many who support this, which gives me hope that if we keep having this conversation, we're going to come to a point where we're going to have sufficient numbers of us begin to press for this. It may not happen overnight, but incrementally we will begin to see more prudent economic management behavior. And then we will be confident that the future would look good.
When you say more of you, more politicians or getting ordinary Ghanaians in your corner, we've seen change happening in Kenya. It didn't happen because a few politicians wanted to do it by themselves.
Yes. Kenya was lucky in the sense that after the disturbances, calm was restored, and then the political class now had the opportunity to do some of the things that they should have done long ago.
Do we need that?
All right. I don't think we need the disturbances before we begin to do the things that Kenya is doing after the disturbances. After all, in many respects, Kenya's economy is not in the kind of difficulty we are in now. And so I'm asking, why are we waiting to have some disturbances of sorts or anything? We should take the bull by the horns and do what is needful. And I am saying that my party should own that conversation, lead it in the Ghana contest, take it to the election, win the election, and fix the problem.
That's what I need to ask you. Currently, your party is in power. So when you say the economies have been run like a Ponzi scheme, it's also...
Historically,
yes, true. But it's also a comment and a verdict on the way it's been run the last 7.5 years. You concede that?
I concede that we've been following that path.
Yeah. And that, coming from you,
and in any case,
powerful. It's a powerful indictment on the administration.
Well, look, let me put it this way. I can show you data that shows how much we earn and how much we borrow in order to survive for each year. I may well, if I want to be partisan, say, well, but under this administration, it has been different. The data is there. If you pick our budgets, you would see it.
It hasn't been different.
It hasn't been different. The deficit figures has been like that. And can
I put it to you?
Yes.
That it's actually been worse in the last 7.5 years than it's ever been in our history.
Well, don't forget that in the last 7 years, there have also been events that have never happened in our history. All right? We all just accepted that the COVID-19 and the hostile global environment have imposed special burdens on us. And therefore, if you say, I have not looked at the figures in that sense yet, but if you say that it has been worse, I would attribute it to that. But honestly, I look at this administration, I look at previous administration, I am not convinced, deep down my heart, that this administration is any worse than the previous ones. I don't believe. I hear people say that, but of course they may be political adversaries and they may say all these things. But trust me, essentially, this government has been very much like previous Ghanaian governments, essentially.
So the point you make, they've been as worse as previous governments?
But then the English should be they are as bad as previous governments.
As bad as previous governments.
But
I want to go to your prescription.
Yeah.
Your prescription for how they can break the aid. You say, one, they must first acknowledge the past and present failures.
The political class.
Yes. Acknowledge. In fact, this is specifically to your party now. This is you're addressing your party.
Yeah.
They must acknowledge the past, as in your party must acknowledge the past and present failures of the political class. And you're actually saying they don't only acknowledge your failure, acknowledge the failures of everybody else other than the NPP.
Yes, past and present.
To provide the kind of quality leadership required to avert the mess in which we find our country today. You think it is in your party's leadership to acknowledge the past and present failures of themselves and others before them?
Well, you don't have to say that we have failed, okay? The things I have been saying imply that anyway. I am saying that we have been spending money we do not have, and the data is clear. And the debt figures going up, our foreign debts going up, and the fact that we can no more service the debts, these are facts in the public domain already. Without using the expression, oh, we have failed, and we can say, look, this path we have been walking has been wrong. It is what is producing some of the instability in the city, and therefore, let it be NPP, all right, that calls the system to order.
But you say they must acknowledge first.
That's what I mean. So we acknowledge that. To acknowledge a failure is to say the path I have been walking has not been helpful, and that there's a need to change course.
Who must do this?
There's nothing wrong with we putting that information out and saying that because of this over expenditures and the lack of proper prioritization of our expenditures, these are the measures we are putting in place to avert that.
I know you use we, but in every organization, for change to happen, there must be leadership. Who must lead this among your ranks?
Once we've had a discussion, anybody, among our ranks, you must understand that the finance minister, for instance, will implement things from cabinet. Cabinet is made up of people. They listen to what the party is saying. I think as NPP, as an organization, we can have this internal conversation. And if, for instance, we get sufficient numbers in the National Council, we get sufficient people in the campaign team to say this is something we must do, then it is easy to proceed to have the discussion.
Should Baumia do this?
But
if he wants to break the aid, because that's your prescription to the party to break
please,
the aid.
You see,
there's a figurehead. Leadership is important. Leadership.
I want to answer it that way. Look, I think the NPP must do it. And if it takes people like me, my colleagues, to initiate and gradually others come on board, that would be good. Immediately you begin to isolate specific persons. You introduce other elements into the discussion,
But
and then
how-
and then you
but
don't
how-
you don't
how-
get
because your point is very specific. To
Yeah.
break the 8,
Yeah.
therefore, we must first, and then you list. Somebody must.
I said the
Somebody
party.
in an official. The
I
party
said the
is
party.
a very amorphous entity.
You know, let me say
That has individuals you put there with authority
Yeah.
that can say to all of you, this is what the party stands for. And the person speaks for the entire group. Somebody must do this. The general secretary, the presidential candidate, or the incumbent president. Who?
Our National Council is made up of all these people, all right? And if this message, for instance, goes to the National Council, they would debate it as a team. Once they debate it, whoever has the responsibility to implement the decision will do their work. It is completely unhelpful if I now sit here and almost to say, it doesn't matter what any other person in the party feels. One person should just take this up and do it. I think you create a difficulty in getting general acceptance for it. And that is why I'm not going to answer that question, except to say that we would continue having this discussion internally. We will be happy if this can be done. Those ones that we are capable of doing within these 4 months, we can demonstrate it. Those ones that would require some planning, we can signal our intention. I say that the communication can reflect whether we really mean to do this or that we are just saying something for the election. I think we are capable of believing this and also communicating in such a way that is credible, that will make us believable and make breaking the 8 much easier.
Are your people capable of acknowledging the past and present failures? You know your
We are.
people.
I'm one of them. And I am not the best person in the
If I
NPP.
put it to you
Yes.
that you are a lone ranger publicly,
Yes.
because I know you've told me that
Yes.
private conversations have been had
Yes.
publicly, you're a lone ranger on this, would you disagree?
I would disagree because some of the ideas you see here, well, if you say in terms of the publicly, discussion,
you're a lone ranger.
But don't even, if you would think carefully, there are many people from the stock of the NPP, all right, that have been saying similar things about our own government. I don't want to mention names. You just reflect on that. You would see
you know
that I'm not the only person calling for these changes.
In these stark terms, you are a lone
whether
ranger.
stark terms or no stark terms, there are people who have come ahead of me who have made these statements. My voice is coming after theirs. We will continue to have that discussion, and I am confident that at some point we're going to get sufficient numbers to speak for this.
Point 2, adopt deep and far-reaching reforms to address the
Yeah.
decades of bad politics and economic mismanagement.
Yeah.
But you go further. You must convince voters that
Yeah.
you shall be ruthless and there will be no sacred cows.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Ghanaian politician has no ruthlessness in them. Not in the NPP, not in the NDs. We've seen all of you before.
Yeah.
This is utopian. I put it to you.
But it's worth fighting for it.
Well, at least
I
you
mean,
admit it's utopian.
all those, well, I don't, but I don't want to debate you on that. You see, all ideas that bring about change initially are seen to be utopian. That it will never happen. This is how we've done it the whole time. I'm sure even before we had independence. If somebody had come and said we could, with some radical input, get independence immediately, people would have said it's not possible. Look, if it is a good idea, it is worth giving it a shot. How or when we get the results, we leave it to God. But it is definitely worthwhile putting in energy to make sure that the things you see as ideals get to happen.
Between now and December 7, give me your top priority suggestion for this far-reaching reform you want to see between now and December.
I don't want to get into those discussions. You see, I can do, and I've just indicated that I think, for instance, that we should cap the number of members of parliament. Some of those clear structural adjustments in our expenditure basket, we can look at them. There are a number of them, but you see, before you bring people to the table, for all of us to dialogue and to see what reforms we want to do, if you start mentioning a number of them that I can suggest, but if you start mentioning some of them, you may take attention away from the fact that there's the need to create the platform and to set into motion the process to do that. I would not go into those except to say that, look, politicians must, and maybe that goes to the third point, that before any reforms would be believed and before we will get public buy-in, we must demonstrate in these communications what sacrifices we are starting with. We must start the reform with ourselves. If we are able to do that well, then people would say, these guys mean business and it is worth giving them the mandate to continue.
With 4 months to go, your verdict is that you haven't seen that. Is that even realistic to expect that within the next 4 months?
You can putting together the message and making the commitments, it does not take that long. And I think even if you have your manifesto out already, if there are specific things you would want to do to let the electorate believe that the future will be different, I don't see why you cannot put it even within a month. The more difficult part is getting the internal conversation to arrive at that conclusion more easily. That's a difficult part. But once there's agreement, even if whatever time is available to us, I think we should signal that the future will be different from the past.
4 months to go. Too late?
Better late than never.
You sincerely believe?
Better late than never, because the alternative to what what is implied in your question is too late, so don't do anything. That's too difficult for me.
I watched the campaign trail.
Yeah.
I have seen no signal that any of this.
You've not seen our manifesto yet.
Will be championed.
You've not seen our manifesto yet.
I've heard your candidate elaborate in quite extensive terms what his key policies are when he launched. After he was voted for, he did a national address. You remember this? We covered it extensively, and he laid out his vision.
Yeah.
Of course, I expect that you'll be fleshing this out in your manifesto. I haven't seen or heard anything from him or anybody else in your campaign that comes close to what you're proposing, and you have 4 months to go.
Well, so it's the reason maybe we need to push this conversation more forcefully within the party. I mean, I do not think that there's sufficient reason in these proposals for anybody to think they are bad ideas, all right? And so I don't foresee the difficulty, but let me make this point. So what? So given the way people are talking and on our campaign platforms, it does not look like it comes close to this. So give up and go and sleep. I can't do that. We push this debate.
Are you disappointed in the way your party have run its campaign so far?
I'm disappointed in the way the political class has managed this country since independence. I'm calling on all my colleagues from all shades of the political divide to reflect on the fact that if we do not change course and this country degenerate into a destabilized democracy, our political parties will not exist.
You know the law of unintended consequences. You mean well.
Yes.
But you also admit that what you've altered, considering your standing in the party, is ammunition with 4 months to go to your opponents to use against your party, considering that you were once a former deputy finance minister, a chair of the finance committee. You say economies have been run like a Ponzi scheme. You've talked about the fact that failures have been made, sacrifices, and to now. You admit that the law of unintended consequences exactly places you really in the crosshairs of your own, but also favorably in the eyes of your opponents who will use your words against your party.
I disagree, and let me explain. Let the NPP go out to say, as politicians, we think we have been managing this country wrongly since independence. We think what the people are calling for is legitimate. Accordingly, this is our response to what people feel about us, politicians. We are doing this, we are doing this, we are doing this. And let the opposing political parties come to say, no, politicians, we've done very well. And let's see who Ghanaians will believe. So that which you are calling a weapon is no weapon. In fact, I think it is risky. Some of these things I have put here. It is very risky for any politician to get up and to say it is not true. People are not unhappy with us politicians. People are very happy with the way we have governed this country since independence. People are happy with the kind of economy we've had and all that. Let's see, I would like to debate anybody from the opposition who says these ones is an indictment on us, but as for them, they don't agree. And let's see whose side the Ghanaian will take. Maybe you should start with yourself. If another politician comes and says the things Kwarteng put out, rubbish, we don't agree. As for us, NDC or CPP or whatever, we think the politicians have been acting right and therefore vote for us. And let's see who gets the support of the people.
You were a former deputy minister, but you lost your job after 2021. Yeah. Are you bitter, and that's why you are decided to go public now with these?
No, but if I was going to be bitter, I would have been bitter 3 years and a half ago.
So the question is, why now?
Because
when it hurts the most, with just 4 months on election.
Well, no, I'm just making the point that I have no reason to be hurt, and I have made the point again that I am contributing to a message I think we should carry to the election. I could not have said 3 years and a half ago that when we get to 2024, I think we should be communicating these messages. So why now? That is the point. But look, I don't have any reason to be bitter. I came to Parliament in 2012 and I was put in what many consider to be the prestigious Finance Committee. The following 4 years, we had power. I was put in the Ministry of Finance as a Deputy Minister for Finance. Look, in 2021, when Parliament became depleted of all the finance guys, and you can count, all the finance guys either lost their primaries or the main election, the leaders of my party and government said to me that, Kwaku, you need to go and support government's work in Parliament. And then I came here. After 3 years, I was invited again to see, look, we need you to go and support the Ministry of Finance again, this time in even a superior capacity. And I said, look, there are some things we are doing in Parliament to support the same government, so please let me remain here.
So you were given the appointment?
I was given the appointment.
As a Deputy Finance Minister?
No, as a Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance. And
that's an elevation?
That was an elevation, but it wasn't the point. Even if it was deputy, so long as you're there to contribute to the work, it would have been fine. But the reason I declined was that I wanted to concentrate on the support we're giving government from Parliament, and that is why I turned it down. Now, why then will you be bitter about what? If I felt that strongly about being removed from the ministry, as soon as it was suggested to me, I would have grabbed it. I said no. So why will I be bitter? Look, what gives me sleepless nights is to see the way we have been managing our economy and to look into the future, trying to find a path to recovery and start fearing that I might leave Ghana that is worse than it is for my children. That gives me sleepless nights. And that is what is motivating some of the things that I am saying. And I'm only asking my party that it is the concern of many Ghanaians as well. So if we will own it as our mission in the 2024 elections, the majority of Ghanaians will be on our side. I'm daring anybody who is a politician who says they want to get the people's vote to come and dispute the things I have put here. Because these are realities. The fact that we've been managing this country like a Ponzi scheme since independence, the fact that we have turned contests for political power into some competition. You wouldn't think, the way we even compete for power, sometimes you would think we're fighting for our daily bread rather than our survival, rather than the opportunity to improve the system for everybody. I call that bad politics. I referred it to that as primitive political culture. I think we must correct that, and it is what I want to see, even if I don't get it to the extent that my idealistic mind can imagine. At least I want to see a certain movement towards that ideal. And then the people of this country will be happier with us. But I take this opportunity again to remind my colleagues, especially in the NPP, who think this is a weapon for the opposition. If anybody from the opposition picked up anything from here, ask that opposition whether he disagrees or he agrees with the fact that the political class has failed, and let the people pass their verdict. I think the facts are there for all to see. I listen to Joy, I listen to your channels, and I hear politicians, we can't find even one. The other I listened to what you guys call editorial, and said, I was looking for just one good politician, and I couldn't find any. You live in a country where people have this attitude towards politicians. You're going into an election to ask those same people to vote for you. You say you don't want to make that concession.
Is Kwaku Kwarteng the one good politician in the midst of?
I'm just like, look, I'm just like any other politician. All I am saying is that we have all collectively been doing the wrong things for so long. Let us all change course.
Have you suffered for this though? Because it was just recently your colleagues in the minority told us that they were gunning to remove you as a finance committee chair. True?
Yes, I had those suggestions.
Were you removed as the finance committee chair because of these views you hold?
If I was going to be removed from the finance committee chair because I hold these views, then the suggestion would not have come to me to go and sit in the Ministry of Finance.
But this was recent.
So at the time that suggestion was being made to me, I was a more liberal finance committee, and within a space of about 3 months, I changed, and that is why, look.
Specifically, they mentioned your opposition to the tax exemptions that came before your committee.
Well, it's not just tax exemptions that I had some reservations about.
So you had reservations about that?
Oh, I did. And I have communicated that. There were other referrals that, it is not every referral that you say, I'm opposed to it. Some you say, if we can do these adjustments, or if we can turn it this way, if we can turn it this way. But in respect of the tax waivers, I did make the point that when you isolate specific companies within industries and Parliament grants them tax waivers, you hurt their competitors in the same industry. So if we want to abolish taxes for industries, it should be for everybody. Then nobody has to go and see somebody to be brought to Parliament to be given tax exemptions. So I was not even against the tax exemptions per se, but I was trying to contribute to my government's own treatment of how we promote investment. It was, for me, a friendly conversation.
So you stalled the approval process, the accusation?
No, we asked more questions and hoped that government, the sponsoring ministries were going to improve it. There were some improvement, but we continue having those discussions until I left the committee.
Well, not a rumor anymore. It was what we now know from your own folks, and in some cases your minority guys on the committee, that you were reshuffled under the guise of the new standing orders because of this specific opposition. Well,
I don't know, but I think my position on many of these referrals would date back to when I started being the finance committee chair.
But this is the most pronounced one. Even the president had to call the minority to a meeting at Jubilee. They came out to tell us that this is one of the things the president put before them, that they should support it.
I don't know. I prefer to think, I don't know what is going on in people's minds, but I prefer to think that in the light of the new committees that had to be formed, changes had to be made. Leadership had their own reasons. I am happy for the assignment they have given me under the new standing orders, and it is my job as an NPP man to do that well. As to what may have motivated what, you can go into people's minds, and I don't want to be guessing.
So you're happy being a member on the committee?
I'm completely happy, and the work we do in Parliament is not just committee chair. Sometimes you are consulted on issues, and there are things that would come here that relate to the budget and the economy in a way that you are considered to have some knowledge. I would definitely be invited to offer ideas. We will continue to do that. That's no problem.
Are you going to be on the campaign trail yourself?
I am a
beyond your constituency. I mean, West. Are you going to be?
Well, I'm on the manifesto committee. I'm on the manifesto committee to start with, but being a candidate.
Are these finding expression in the manifesto that will be launched, we understand, in August?
I can go ahead of my superiors and indicate what is in there. Let's wait and see what's in there. But the point I'm making is that being the parliamentary candidate and campaigning for the president in your constituency, it's a big contribution to the campaign in a way. If we have to craft our messages out of our manifesto, we'll be there to provide whatever support we can provide. We are confident we are winning this election, and I think that if we would add this to our messages, it makes it much easier for us to break the 8. But I read
your message, and the message I get is you only break the 8 if you do these things that you suggested. True? Am I reading it right?
Well, you make it more certain. If you read the last, I said it would follow more. But look, there was
you say, let's read it. Once you lead by example, we can say with integrity to our people that we are sinking a common boat and called again into duty. Then as politicians, I think the point you're making there is that it will follow naturally. As a political party, if we sincerely believe and can demonstrate our faithfulness to these commitments, and we've already gone through them, breaking the 8 will follow naturally. Yeah. So it's very clear.
So it will be easier.
Okay.
It will be easier.
Now, yeah, you're saying that without these, we still win?
Look, if we were competing against another political party that has adopted these, all right, if we adopt these, I think it elevates us above the other political parties. If you
don't adopt it?
If we don't adopt it, then it is the traditional fight between two political parties in an election.
A race to the bottom.
And that is what I fear. That then,
but will you still win?
You do not make it as set. Look, you don't know what results you're going to have. We hope we would win. We hope we would win the election. I don't know for certain, and therefore I will not speak in that language. But I don't want that to get in the way of this. I think that even beyond the election, we need this anyway. Whether or not it's for election or not, these changes must happen for the sake of our children.
Mr. Kwarteng, thank you very much.
Thank you too very much.
I'm grateful
thank you
for joining us.